The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Labor Party will support and vote through all stages the Remuneration Authority Members of Parliament Remuneration Amendment Bill. We will do that because, like most members in this House, we never asked for a big pay increase. We never wanted a big pay increase, and we do believe there ought to be restrictions on remuneration. Having said that, there are a few matters that need to be discussed. And the first I would say to the Minister is that I've just received a copy of the papers that go with the bill. And I have just received the departmental disclosure statement from Moby. No chance to read it before I stand to speak. In fact, I had 2 minutes because it was so late and being provided. So then I went through what is in the Moby report, and I looked at the questions that are asked of the government and the responses from Moby. And here are some of them. Were any regulatory impact statements provided to inform the policy decisions that led to this bill? Answer, no. Has further impact analysis become available for any aspect of the policy to be given effect by this bill? Answer, no. For the policy to give effect by this bill, is there analysis available on the size of the potential costs and benefits? Answer, no. B, the potential for any group or persons to suffer substantial unavoidable loss of income or wealth? No. Has there been advice provided by the Attorney-General on whether any provisions in this bill might limit the rights and freedoms, etc.? No. Has there been any external consultation on the policy to be given effect in this bill or in the drafting of this bill? The answer is no. I go on through, and Mr Speaker, does this bill affect, etc., etc.? Can I say to the Minister, Minister, this affects everybody in this House, and it would have been really good if this sort of information had been made available last week or the week before when this bill was proposed. This must have been available to the government because let's get things right. We were meant to debate this last week. Yes. We were told we were having urgency last week, and then at the last minute the whole thing was pulled. I now note that this is version 7.3 of the supplementary order paper to fix the formula. We've also noted, Minister, it's pretty sloppily worded. So there's been a hasty decision to bring this in, and we don't believe you've necessarily, Minister, done the work on it. And certainly Moby have pointed out that there's lots of things in this bill that have not been looked at, which is the normal practice in any legislation. What we now know is the sole criterion for setting remuneration under this bill will be the Quarterly Employment Survey, the QES, for the public sector average ordinary time weekly earnings for full-time equivalent employees, using the average for the year to June compared with the average of the previous year to June. Using this measure means the remuneration of members of Parliament will increase in line with the average public sector salary. So what I want to ask the Minister is this different from what was proposed last week, and how exactly is it different from what was proposed last week? And I'll get on to that in a moment. But I want to first of all point out, Mr Speaker, that this bill has been a long time in its gestation, because in 2010, just before Christmas, John Key urged restraint over the setting of MP salaries. That was 5 years ago. In November 2011, John Key said he was disappointed with part of the MP salary increase. That was 4 years ago. In October 2013, John Key said MP salary increases should be small or zero. That was 2 years ago. Come forward to the 26th of February 2015, and John Key said in Parliament that he may change the law on how MPs' rates are set in the future. So today we are going about to do that. But for practically every year for 5 years, the Prime Minister was going to do something about the pay rises that MPs receive. The Prime Minister talked about doing it for days when a decision came out from the Remuneration Authority, and then he would retreat back to the 9th floor to do nothing. And finally, he has decided to do something about it. He had the power to do something about it. He had the numbers to do something about it. He had the ability to consult with members of the House to do something about it. But it is only now that we have a bill before us rushed into this House to be passed under urgency so that members of Parliament do not receive the increase that was provided through the Remuneration Authority. As I said, Mr. Speaker, none of us asked for the pay rise, and I have yet to meet one of my colleagues who would want this sort of pay increase. We feel that we should not be getting pay increases that are greater than other New Zealanders. We all know what happens when members of Parliament are seen to get more than other people. There is a backlash from the public. So we believe that there ought to be a proper way of setting the salaries. And of course, that is why we ended up with the Remuneration Authority. There is a history of political meddling in the way salaries and conditions are set, and a very good example arose over former members over the last few days. And when you look at the history of that, it goes right back to the 1970s when MPs were trying not to take bigger increases, and it was put into travel. And so we've had political meddling going on in MPs' salary setting for a long time. We do need to have a way that sets it fairly in line with other New Zealanders. And what we want to know from the Minister, and when he gets into the chair a little later on, we want to know whether he has got the formula right. I'm not sure, because last week when we were meant to be debating this bill, I just happened to read David Farrer's blog. And unlike the government, he had done some work on the methodology that the government was using to set MP's salary. And what did he find? He found that, in fact, MPs, if they would use the formula put up by the government last week, would have got a bigger pay increase than what actually was provided. Under the new law that was put up last week, the average would have been 3.1%. Under the current law, it would have been 1.7. So what we want to know, Minister, have you got it right now? Because we do not want to come back into this House to fix up a mistake. And so the Minister is saying, yes, he's got it right, a guarantee from the Minister, this formula will do the job. This formula will be fair. In fact, I'd have to say, Minister, we would argue that until the government addresses the very high salaries paid to CEO of government's departments, we are not actually addressing some of the problem in New Zealand. And so we'd like to see how that's going to be addressed in the future. We will support this bill. We want to see salaries reined in, and we want to also see the salaries of CEO packets reined in the public sector, because they have got way out of kilter with the rest of those who work in New Zealand. So we will examine closely, Minister, when you're in the chair in the committee stage, exactly how it will work, because what we don't want to do is to waste the time of this Parliament fixing up a mistake made in a formula because the work wasn't done before the Prime Minister rushed out to say he was going to do something. It has to be right. This is not good enough, because at the end of the day, every member in this House takes the odium from the public when our salaries and conditions are raised in the public media. So, Minister, I want the insurance later on. You've got this right. And perhaps you can explain in detail how the formula works, because it is incredibly complex to be able to understand.